But first, our top story hits the employment report for September, and John Keith is here with the latest. John, thanks for joining us this morning. And what are we jumping into when we're looking at the latest unemployment numbers?
Well, the truck transportation sector dropped 5,000 jobs in October compared to September. It is now stands at 1,578,600 jobs. And what's really more important is that the last 4 months we've been, because there have been revisions, of course, we were down 6,900 jobs, then down 30,700 jobs. That was really the impact of yellow. Then we were up 13,400 jobs, which looked like BLS had maybe overestimated yellow. And now we're down 5,000 jobs. So the net is 30,600 jobs down since the high that was in May, which was over 1.6 million jobs. So, this really isn't shocking. We know there's a freight recession. We also know that companies still continue to hire. There are always openings, but there obviously are fewer jobs out there. The warehouse sector took another really big hit. They were down more than 11,000 jobs since the prior month. I haven't done the numbers yet on where they are compared to their high, but their high was sometime during the pandemic. Companies were building warehouses like crazy. They were paying top dollar for space, hiring people left and right. That obviously is done now. And the total number of jobs in warehouse, it'll be in my story today, but it's way down from its peak.
John, so when we're talking about this, are we going to be maybe seeing any correlation with these warehouse numbers dropping significantly, maybe down the line, like 2-3 months, even a quarter or two, starting to see maybe our warehouse vacancy rates climb back up simply because people aren't using the warehouse space? There's not people to staff them, so people aren't using that space anymore.
I've never done the work on correlating available space and the number of workers, but boy, that just seems like a very obvious link. It's hard to imagine a scenario where the two of them would not have some degree of correlation.
And John, we're looking at the latest report. What was the overall results for the unemployment rate? It was been hovering around 3.8 for the longest time. Do we see any change there?
I didn't look at the rate yet. The total number of jobs gained was 150,000, which is kind of in line with projections. What you don't know is what was the impact from the auto strike and how many jobs that cost. 150,000 job gain first of all, the Fed is trying to slow that number. Okay, if you remember last month, it was up 300,000. Now, I've already seen a little bit of online screaming about some revisions, some downward revisions from prior months. Somebody said the BLS should be really named the BS. If you can I'm sure you can figure out what that reference is. So there were definitely some downward revisions, but right now it's up 150,000, but it's up 150,000 over a revised September number. So the revisions are still in that growth.
It's interesting to see how this is changing, and will be interesting to see how our holiday season impacts that as well. John, let's move on to our second top story this morning, because we've got a pretty important story to talk about with Berkshire Hathaway being sued by the original owners of Pilot. Can you tell us what's going on there?
Well, there's lots of news, and our slogan here, FreightWaves, if it's news to us. But anyway, what happened there is that in the Delaware Chancery Court, the Haslam family, which was the founding family of Pilot, sued Berkshire Hathaway. So Berkshire Hathaway earlier this year completed earlier agreed upon acquisition of a second big stake in Pilot, which took them to control at 80%. There's question whether there was a determination that the last 20% was going to be sold. But what the Haslams are arguing is that, and I guess I haven't digested the entire suit, what the Haslams are arguing is that the Berkshire Hathaway people changed accounting status or changed the accounting procedure at Pilot because they're in control now, and that would eventually reduce the value of the Haslam stake that remains. So that really, as far as I can tell, that really is the heart of the lawsuit. That the Haslams are saying in their suit that the parties had agreed upon an accounting process that would continue through the life of this deal, and that the Berkshire Hathaway accounting staff, financial people, have changed that, and that is the basis for the lawsuit. So we will have a story on FreightWaves.com later today on that.
And John, we're looking at the situation. I always have to ask, is there any precedents for this where we've seen a similar situation in the past?
Well, probably. I can't imagine there's never been a lawsuit over accounting practices, but the pilot deal was always kind of interesting. As a journalist, it was killing me that Travel Centers of America was going private in its acquisition by BP, because they always had some great data in their quarterly earnings on diesel sales and diesel margins. Well, that of course went away when TA disappeared into BP. Now, with the Berkshire Hathaway earnings, there is some public information about Pilot that's available. There's even more data in there now. The one thing I saw is that the sale price, the original sale price, was 10 times EBITDA on Pilot, and that was actually the formula used for the second tranche that Berkshire Hathaway bought. So we're going to get a little peek behind the curtain here on what had been a privately held company and the largest truck stop operator in America.
So, John, any indication on where the suit is being pursued, and if there's any state versus federal statutes here that could be impacted by this?
It's in Delaware Chancery Court. I assume that probably both companies are incorporated in Delaware, and that's why that case is taking place there.
And John, while we have you here, I always have to ask the latest in the energy sector and what's happening with oil.
Well, it's been down. Took a pretty nice pretty nice move upward yesterday. I'm trying to think if I can find one little nugget. I will tell you that one of the most interesting pieces of data right now is out of Iran. Their production is up a lot. The U.S. production is up a lot. And when you put those two together, it pretty much offsets a lot of the OPEC plus cuts that have been put into place. This is why in July it seemed inevitable that we were going to hit $100 Brent. We never did hit $100 Brent. It's at about 90 right now, so it's not that far away. But the supply side is looking pretty healthy between the U.S. and Brazil and Iran and Guyana, and Nigeria is also, Nigeria, which is always a mess, has actually added quite a bit of production. So the supply side, from the perspective of a consumer, like a truck driver, on the crude side is right now looking pretty good.
John, same thing for the state of the diesel markets right now. I know in your DOE article this week, you talked a little bit about how we saw that sudden spike from the Israel-Palestine conflict, and now it's kind of settled down. Is that something that we can expect to see continue throughout the rest of the week?
Well, there's really no reason for the Israel-Hamas conflict to have an impact on oil in terms of supply. There is no supply that has been affected. The spike was always driven by the concern that there might be an expansion of the war into Iran. It's Iranian. Hamas is an Iranian proxy. Hezbollah is an Iranian proxy. That there might be an Israeli attack on Iran, maybe on the oil fields. Maybe the Iranians would retaliate by closing the Strait of Hormuz, which is the kind of gateway out of the Persian Gulf into the broader world market. That fear was always there, understandable. The price went up, but nothing has expanded now. I mean, right now the focus on the Israelis is how deep do they go into Gaza, much less what they do in Iran. So I don't think the market is really concerned about that kind of expansion of what's going on in Israel that would create even more tightness in the oil market.
John Kingston, our editor-at-large, going from employment to legal issues over to oil and diesel, geopolitical, everything all in one. Thanks so much for joining us, John. Looking forward to your next episode of Drilling Deep.
Yeah, it's today. That's today, and it's all about cybersecurity. So please tune in, and we'll see you all in Chattanooga.
There you go. A very timely topic, and we'll see you next week, John. Right now, we're going to go over to the wall. We've got a first carrier update this morning. Thomas Lawson is here with Donnie Gilbert.